I'm going to start out by saying this isn't some flashy, scary story and doesn't have the most satisfying ending, but no one got hurt, which I'm grateful for. This all happened when I was in 5th or 6th grade. I'm Canadian, so we have primary school, kindergarten to grade 8, high school, grade 9 to grade 12 or 13, then college or university. So I would have been around 8 or 9 at this time. I'm now writing this as a 23-year-old, going to be 24 in July, so my memory may be a bit foggy, but what happened this day will forever stand out to me. My sister and I, who was 2 years younger than me, let's call her Paya, went to this little French immersion school. At the time, we were not living close to it, and had to take a school bus. The bus stop where we would be picked up in the morning and dropped off in the afternoon was about a block or so away from the apartment buildings we lived in. My sister and I would get up at 7 a.m. to catch the bus at 7:30 to get to school by 8. There was another family that also caught the bus at our stop with some younger children, so we were never fully alone. But my sister and I would walk there from home without any adults because my mother worked nights and my sister and I thought we were old enough to walk the short distance alone. This is important later. This all happened during late spring, think around April-May, when the weather was getting consistently hotter during the day, upwards of 20 degrees Celsius. Again, important later. I should also note that I have allergenic asthma, which means activities like running or strenuous exercise, as well as allergens like pollen, can trigger my asthma. For this reason, I wasn't a big runner, and seeing me run was a rare occurrence. So in the morning, I'm not a morning person and never have been. Bright and early at 7:15 a.m., my sister and I head out to go wait at the bus stop for the school bus. Everything was pretty normal, me being the more obviously tired one of us. But something stuck out to me. I noticed an old brown pickup truck parked in one of the driveways of a nearby house. A person sat in the driver's seat seemingly doing nothing, maybe asleep. This wouldn't have been weird, except I knew the people that lived there, and they drove a minivan. Maybe it was just how ugly the color of the brown pickup was, but it stuck out to me. In hindsight, I should have questioned why the guy was in the truck just sat there in the vehicle for over 15 minutes doing nothing, but I was too tired to care. Off to school we went, and the day was honestly forgettable in how routine it was. On the bus to go home, however, my sister and I got into an argument. So when we got to our stop, Paya took off running back to the house ahead of me, leaving me with the parents who picked up their younger children at the stop. And then after they left, I was alone. I was not impressed by the stunt that my sister had pulled, but began my walk down the street with traffic near me, going the same way I was walking. I was about a minute into my walk home when I noticed that brown pickup truck that looked oddly familiar. I hadn't realized at the time, but it was probably the one from the morning. It was slowing down beside me as I walked. Now, it was a pretty hot day. One kid collapsed during recess because of heat stroke, so I was having a hard time already due to the heat. The driver from the old brown pickup rolls down the passenger window to talk to me, waving a hand at me to get me to stop. I do stop because I was raised to be polite, but I kept my distance. A patch of grass separating the curb and the sidewalk, meaning I had at least 60 centimeters of space between me and the curb. "Hey kiddo, where you headed?" The driver, a man in his late 50s or so, asked. Now, I had been raised knowing all about stranger danger, so I was already on guard about this. "Home," I told him, purposely vague about it. At this point, the man leaned over and unlocked the passenger door, and I was able to see him a little better. He had a tattoo of what I think was a tiger or some other animal up his right arm. He wore a plain gray muscle shirt. I couldn't see what kind of pants he was wearing because I'm short. His hair was salt and pepper, pulled back into a greasy ponytail, and he had a mustache. His skin tone was tan, but he seemed to be Caucasian, and his hands were large, with a scar across his knuckles. "How about you hop in and I'll give you a ride? It's pretty hot out here today," this complete stranger offered me, with a smile, and I noticed he seemed to have a missing tooth. I, of course, smiled back, not to be rude, and simply said a polite, "No, thank you, sir," and started walking again. Now, this would have been fine and dandy if it had ended like that, but instead he began keeping pace with me with his truck and insisting I get in, that it was too hot out, and that all the other kids had been picked up. Now, this struck me as odd, and still does even now, because this meant he had been watching when all of us got off the bus. Though I guess he didn't notice my sister run off, but still, this was creepy. I again said, "No, thank you," but he didn't seem to take the hint. In fact, he became more pushy, and maybe a little irritated. He had pulled up so close to the curb that he was almost jumping it with his pickup now. And at this point, I was really feeling scared. This man might try to do something I wouldn't like. So I quickly said, "Have a nice day," and then took off running as fast as I could towards the apartment complex. I vaguely heard him shout something to me, but I just kept running, cutting over the grassy hill with a few trees on it, instead of staying on the sidewalk. I saw that someone had just left the underground parking area that connected two of the buildings, so I ran in just before the door that lets the cars out closed. I didn't stop running until I made it to the 8th floor, got into my house and slammed and locked the door. At this point, I was in a full-blown asthma attack, as well as crying in fear. I had collapsed against the door, hyperventilating and sobbing, and my sister was now freaking out at how I just burst in like that. I couldn't get out what I was trying to say, as I could barely breathe. I eventually was able to calm down, and my mother came home from what she had been doing. I was able to explain what happened. My mother then called the police, and we had a female officer come interview me, to whom I recounted only what had happened on my way home from the bus stop. I didn't put it together that he had probably been watching us earlier that morning, as well as later. The nice policewoman took my statement. Unfortunately, nothing ever came of the investigation, and it didn't help that I couldn't remember the license plate, other than it looked like it wasn't from Ontario, Canada, which in hindsight is even scarier to me. So I never really heard anything after that. But to the man who may or may not have tried to kidnap me on my way home from school, let's not meet, ever. This happened last night. I was almost home after a long day of traveling, and it was approximately 1 a.m. as I rounded the corner and stopped at the intersection right near my home. The light was red, and as I slowed to a stop, out of the corner of my eye I saw these people on the sidewalk. They were all dressed in black and wearing white face masks or face paint, maybe a combination of the two. One was crouched on the ground while the other two were standing crooked. They were still like statues when I came to a stop, but when I looked at them, they all started crawling and walking towards me. I was exhausted, and apparently my instincts in that moment of terror is to just laugh and shake my head like I was in on the joke. They were super close to my car, but thankfully the light turned green, and I was able to get out of there before they reached my car. Since you could see the corner of my house from the intersection, I ended up driving for quite a while, and then turning back around once I felt like enough time had passed, so that they didn't follow my car pulling into the street I live on. I imagine it was just some teens playing a prank, but afterwards I was thinking about it being a school night, and most people wouldn't be having sleepovers in the middle of the week. I'm debating on if it's worth calling the non-emergency line to report it just in case. Regardless, I won't be going out past sundown for quite some time, and I'll likely invest in some door lock reinforcements. This happened a few days ago, but I still feel creeped out if I think about it. I live near a big city, and I don't have a car, so I have to take the bus every day. The day started pretty normal. I was already on for like 10 minutes, and two young girls, around 10 and 11, get on the bus and sat in the seats in front of me. Some minutes passed by, and the next stop, a really creepy looking guy, around 50, got on and sat 2 rows in front of the girls. He had on dirty clothes and overall looked really unhygienic. Some minutes passed and I saw that he always turned his head back to look at the girls that were sitting in front of me. It was already weird. Again, a few minutes passed and I saw the guy getting out his phone and pointed towards me and the two girls. It felt weird, but suddenly I saw a flash of his phone. I was shocked, but thought maybe he accidentally put the flash on. 2 minutes passed and he did it again. At this point, I felt disgusted and got up and went over there. I was angered and fueled with disgust. I asked him, "What the fuck are you doing?" He asked back, "What do you mean?" I screamed at him in the middle of the bus, "Delete the pictures you took of the girls." He started to smile, but in a really creepy way. He looked at me and told me that he took a photo, but not of the girls. That was the moment the realization happened. The guy took photos of me. I was shocked and felt creeped out. I didn't know what to do. I just sat back in my seat and waited for the ride to arrive. Fortunately, the girls took the next stop and the guy didn't. At this point, I knew he really told the truth about taking pictures of me and not the girls. Me and the guy got off at the same stop, but he didn't do anything, just stared at me. I still feel a bit creeped out if I think about it. I'm happy because the two girls weren't harmed, but this is creepy as hell. This happened back in 2018. I was 24 and my sister was 25. We're both native New Yorkers, and there are plenty of stories I have. I think we all know New York is strange. Anyway, we were on a crowded train going to meet up with a friend. There are no seats, so we were holding onto the pole. It was already a tight squeeze, but this man and a girl get on and hold the pole that my sister and I are both holding. We're talking and notice the man directly in front of us keeps looking at us, like really looking. I'm already feeling uncomfortable as it is, and it's hard not to pay attention. I try to ignore it by talking to my sister. By the way, we're nowhere near our destination. A couple of train stops later, he eventually says to us, "Are you guys sisters?" We both look at one another, feeling awkward, and I'm like, "Yeah." At this point, I'm praying that the train would hurry up to get to the next stop so we can get off. I know my sister was thinking the same. The other girl is looking at us, and she looks uncomfortable. He smiles and seems to get excited, if you know what I mean. He then says to us, "Oh yeah, you guys are sisters," in an incredibly perverted tone. He licks his lips and keeps looking from my sister to me, back and forth. At this point, the girl gives us an awkward smile, and she looks just as terrified as we do. I could tell that this man was getting really excited by the fact that we were sisters, and then comments about how beautiful we are. My sister looks at me and we see a stop coming. We both know that it's not our stop, but we're leaving the train. He keeps talking to us and we keep ignoring him. As soon as the doors open, we leave the train. Again, I've been in many weird and uncomfortable situations, but the fact that he was literally so close to us with his perverted smile, his excited eyes, and excited, you know what. Yeah. I'm glad we were able to get away from him safely. Thankfully, he didn't follow us. My girlfriend and I were thrifting at Goodwill recently, and she went to go look at some clothes in front of the mirror. I stayed by the cart probably 15 feet away and kept looking at clothes. I looked over at her and noticed a bald, pudgy guy with a son that looked to be about 5 years old behind her. He had his phone pointed towards her, and I really don't want to think that this guy was taking pictures of my girlfriend's ass, so I kept watching. He acts like he's looking for toys with his son for a second. Then when she turns around again, he takes his phone out and points it at her. I immediately get filled with so much rage and walk over to him. I ask him if he's taking some pictures, and he says, "Yeah, of my son. Isn't he cute?" I say, "No, he isn't. You're taking pictures of something else." He said he wasn't. I said, "Show me your camera roll," and he said he didn't have to. I told him I really don't want to smash your phone and beat you in front of your child. Then he started deleting the pictures while his hands were shaking, and I made him go to his recently deleted folder and permanently remove them. Then I called him a piece of shit and to never do that again. I really regret not whooping his ass though. I've been super angry at the thought of him doing that to other people, and I want to make him suffer. I live in a relatively walkable area of a city, and recently this guy's been coming to our house and leaving things in the porch basket we use to receive packages. We caught him on the Ring camera twice, and have since bought the Ring paid plan so we could watch the videos back. The first time we left a pouch of weed and papers. The weed was sealed, and the papers were not. We thought it was a promotion for the Dab Lounge across the street, but probably not. Mind you, weed is not legal in my state, but there are obvious loopholes. The second time, he returned within 30 minutes of the first, and left a handful of Pokemon cards and a page torn out of an old journal filled with nonsense ramblings. He came back for a third time today, 5 days after the first and second, and left a bowl, like for weed, and the packaging for a dog muzzle. We were unable to watch the video back this time, but he came up to the porch smiling, put the bowl in the basket, then sat down to read the newspaper flyer someone had left on our doorstep. He then added the muzzle packaging and left. I'm not sure if this sub is supposed to be for advice or not, but what the hell do you do in this situation? I don't know if calling the police would help anything since he hasn't exactly done anything. I was around 8 years old when I was playing cricket in my street with kids my age. It's a very common thing in India for kids to play in the middle of the street. It was my turn to bat, and the batsman's wicket was in such a way where it faced directly to the entrance of the home in a cross section of 3 streets. And this home was filled with Middle Eastern people who seemed to be Iranians. While I took the bat and went on to play, I missed the first ball, and while I was waiting for the next ball, I heard a huge rock falling next to me. I turned back thinking it was the other kids just pulling my leg, but then I see a huge boulder falling towards me, and this is when I freaked out and started running, followed by other kids. Whilst we were running, we see some other Middle Eastern group of men approaching the home, and one of them got on their bike and held some cylinder thing in their mouth and pulled it out, and it was a fucking dagger. The men inside the home resumed with their throwing at these men, while these men were trying to walk inside the home, and having some people give them cover by throwing rocks at the people in the home. The neighbors around also were shouting at these people, asking why these guys were doing this, and the owner of the home lived next to the house and called the cops. They arrived in no time and held the dudes that they could, while my parents put me in my home and locked it. All I remember is the cops came and assured the neighbors that they were safe. However, to this day we don't know why they fought like that, and the cops didn't reveal the reason why. But the guy with the dagger, let's not meet again. For context, I live with my girlfriend. In the last month, her and I are the only people that I know of that have been in my car. We live in an apartment complex right off the highway. Apartment won't add more parking despite not having enough, so sometimes we have to park right off the highway with no one around. I've been worried that might make it a higher risk for my car getting broken into, but we live in a decent area, so I don't think about it that much. Anyway, Saturday night, me and my lady get back from hanging out with some friends. I had brought my backpack over, so I went to the back seat to get it, and noticed a red Craftsman power drill sitting under my seat. I grabbed it assuming my girlfriend had put it there, but she didn't recognize it. My dad and bro had come over for a project a few weeks ago, so I thought that they maybe placed it there, but after reaching out, they as well have never seen this drill before. I'll keep this last part short, but because of what I've already mentioned, I'm always checking my phone to make sure I remember to lock my car. I can see if it's locked on the app. The Wednesday or Thursday before, however, I'd woken up and noticed I left my car unlocked all night. Didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Am I reaching here? What else could it be? Why would someone put a drill in my car and leave? Forgot to add, drill seemed like it was full battery when I found it. This happened about 5 years ago. I randomly just felt like I wanted to share this with someone. I also hope this can help other people in similar situations. I had just gotten out of a 2 year long relationship, living in a city I moved to for my then boyfriend. After he left, I felt lonely and heartbroken. I was stuck in the apartment we shared. I downloaded Tinder to chat to guys as a way of coping with the breakup. There, I matched with this guy. He was about 4 years older than me. He was extremely handsome and charming. He was very much into fitness and had an amazing body. After talking for a few days, he asked to meet, so we did. He came over to my house and I was immediately attracted to him. He was a bad boy, the kind I usually fall for. But he was also sweet in the way that he talked to me. He kept complimenting me and doing sweet stuff for me. After a few days of meeting, we ended up having sex, and honestly, it was the best sex I've ever had. I felt this intense chemistry between us. We started hanging out and having sex a lot. At the time, I did smoke weed a lot. I know he smoked too, and did some other drugs. I didn't really care much at the time. Eventually, he ended up asking me to hang out pretty much every day, begging me to come over because he missed me. When I told him I was too tired, he would bribe me with stuff, like saying he would give me massages, weed, dinner, romantic things, give me the best night, etc. He didn't like it when I told him no. He would sometimes get angry, send a bunch of messages just pleading for me to come over. After every time I had been to his house, he would shower me with love via messages. He was so romantic, saying I made him feel so amazing, that there was something special about me, and that he loved being with me. He would often shower me with compliments, but then get angry when I said I didn't have time to hang out with him. One time when I was at his house, he got a phone call from someone. After he hung up, he told me I had to go upstairs and hide because his baby mama was coming over. He didn't want her to see me because she was crazy. He had told me some crazy stuff she had apparently done. I believed him. He was very convincing. I believe this happened twice. Now I know I should have seen the red flags. I probably did to some extent, but I didn't care much. I kept hanging out a lot with him even though I figured that he was heavy on drugs, like coke and speed. One day, I was at his house and we had sex. I had smoked a lot and he was on coke and probably some other stuff. He wanted to have sex again, but got frustrated that he couldn't get it up. He got mad and kind of blamed it on me for not being firm enough on the grip. He kind of yelled at me, "Squeeze harder," and he just kept getting more frustrated. I felt uncomfortable and wanted to leave, but he wanted me to stay. He tried to continue, but it didn't work. I was extremely uncomfortable and felt embarrassed. After a while, I told him I wanted to leave. He then told me to give him back the weed he gave me, as in his mind, it was payment for me being with him. I honestly felt so pissed, so I grabbed my stuff and walked out the door. He followed me. At first, he walked calmly about 30 meters behind me, begging me to stay with him, asking where I was going. I kept walking and saying no. He then ran towards me. I picked up my phone to call a friend of mine because I could tell that he was getting aggressive. I turned around and saw him literally tear his shirt open and stomping towards me. He grabbed the phone out of my hands, then kicked me in the stomach so hard that I fell into a ditch. He then smashed my phone to the ground and then told me, "You're done." I thought he was going to beat me up, but then it looked like he was actually trying to contain himself for a second and just turned around and left. I was mortified by what he had done. I ran away, shaking. I can't even remember how I got home, but I somehow did. I was able to borrow a phone from someone else and call my friend. He came over. I had bruises on my stomach and legs, and I had no phone. I also called the police using my friend's phone and told him that I wanted to press charges. A few days later, he messaged me saying that I tried to steal from him, that I took advantage of him just to get some weed. A few hours later, he texted me saying sorry. A few more hours, he texted me asking what had happened to me yesterday. Then a week later, he found out that I had reported him to the police. He was mad. He said he couldn't believe I reported him. Then he told me that he would give me 2 new phones or whatever I wanted if I withdrew the report. That he wouldn't contact me anymore if I just did it. He just didn't want to get in trouble and didn't want to lose his daughter. I didn't answer. Then he sent me another message fabricating the whole story of what happened that night. He kept harassing me for weeks with messages. Some days he was begging us to get back together or be friends, bribing me. Other days he was accusing me of random stuff, calling me names, etc. And that he had a great lawyer, that he would report me to the police for stuff I had never actually done. He kept acting like a smartass, saying that he would beat me in court. It all just became big chaos. After a few months, there was a trial. I couldn't attend physically, so I testified via a phone call. I was questioned about our relationship and the incident that night. He lied, made up stories about me, but no one believed him. As the trial was done, I received all the papers in the mail. I was shocked when I read it. He had previously been charged with violence and rape towards his ex. Apparently, there was also an incident where he forced his ex-girlfriend to touch him while multiple other men watched and videotaped her. There were other girls too that had experienced similar things. Stuff like robbery, weapons, fights, violence, and torture. You name it. He had been in jail multiple times. I had no idea I was dealing with such a dangerous man. I'm pretty sure he is a psychopath. He has no understanding of what he has done. The sick part is, I recently came across a post of him on Facebook. Apparently, he is pretty popular with women lately on Snapchat and Instagram. He posts stuff about his life, wanting about being beaten up by random men, being tortured, robbed, etc. That people followed him with guns. I have learned the reason why he keeps getting beaten up by people is because they know what he has done. He posted pictures of himself in the hospital to make people feel bad for him. And they do. He makes women feel sorry for him. He says people lie and make up stories about him, and he gains pity. He then posts all the sweet replies and messages girls send him, saying stuff like he feels so grateful for all the support. He's extremely good at manipulating people. I honestly feel lucky I got away at the time I did, and that it didn't escalate any further. I checked his Facebook and apparently he has a girlfriend now. I pray he doesn't hurt her in any way.